CEO here at the Sarnia-Lambton Chamber of Commerce. I welcome you on an absolutely gorgeous day here in Sarnia. Before we proceed, I would like to introduce our guest presenters today. We have Lisa Kelly, Program Manager for the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for waving, Lisa. And also, is Boyan on the call? I don't see Boyan at his computer. Boyan Metrobec, he's also a Program Manager with the OCC, and they'll be introducing the Discoverability Network, which the Sarnia Chamber is working in concert with Discoverability Network in collaboration with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. So having said all that, I'd like to pass it over to Lisa to begin the presentation. And obviously, we are open to questions as we proceed. But thank you all again for attending, and please look forward to the slideshow. Lisa, thank you, and please proceed.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I want to make sure that everybody can see my full screen there. Sarnia-Lambton Chamber of Commerce. Yes, and I'm also say I am a former employment counselor. Alan, if you want a job in radio ever, with that voice, you could go far.
As they say, I have a voice or a face for radio.
I was a radio disc jockey for 1.5 years, so I have one as well. Thank you very much for inviting us here to talk to you today about the Discoverability Network, which is a Ontario Chamber of Commerce initiative. And you'll see our logo there on the bottom right-hand corner. And the program, the initiative we're going to talk to you today that we're doing in conjunction with the Sarnia-Lambton Chamber of Commerce is on the bottom left-hand logo, which is the Discoverability Network. I am going to share out a copy of these slides after this presentation. There are links embedded in the document so you can access it. And if you have any questions, the very last slide has both mine and Boyan's information. I will also try to pause at regular portions during this presentation in case you have questions. So what is the Discoverability Network? Well, it is an initiative of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce in conjunction with Magnet Ryerson here downtown Toronto. And it was really driven from, our local chambers of commerce. I'm going to ask everybody to mute their microphones if that's all right.
One of you might have to get
maybe Heather, if I could get you to mute your microphone. And Shauna, thank you. Okay. So, sorry about that. So the program has 3 legs. And about 5 years ago, when we were consulting with the local chambers of commerce, we heard a consistent request or piece of information that made us realize that employers were telling us that one of the biggest concerns that was inhibiting their profitability and growth was a lack of talent, right? So we created the job matching platform called Discoverability. And it connects business to job seekers with a disability. It's free for both to use. You can see the link down here, sarnia.discoverability.network is how you sign up. And it's free to use for everybody. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a moment. The second thing we realized really in the last year or two, as more and more people have been using the platform, is there's a need for training on this subject. So it's one thing to say, yeah, I'm going to advertise and open this up to candidates who have a disability. It's another thing to actually have that work in your business. So we've created free training. We have free training for employers, free training for universities and colleges, free training for job seekers or people with disability, and free training to employment service providers. And that training covers a whole bunch of topics, everything from, what is a disability to inclusive recruiting, disclosure and accommodations, the AODA, how to make your documents accessible. So a whole bunch of things. You can contact me if you want a full list. The last thing we do is try to have regular networking events that connect employers to job seekers. Because one of the ways you get comfortable about hiring people with disabilities is you interact with them on a regular basis. So we create these very low risk, all you're having to do is talk to somebody, about what your company does, what you're looking for, and they can ask you questions about how you get hired, and everybody becomes more comfortable talking about themselves if you're a job seeker, or if you're a business, you know, interacting with a wide range of people with different disabilities. Why this field? Well, there are a large number of people with disabilities out in the Canadian population. In fact, according to Stats Can in 2017, the most recent national survey, 20% of Canadians self-identify as having a disability. That's a gigantic number, 1 in 5. Just let that sink in for a moment. That's 1 in 5 of, you know, the labor market, 1 in 5 of your customers, 1 in 5 of employers. Okay, it's really big number. Surprising, it's equal to about 6.2 million Canadians. Surprisingly, I think for a lot of people, the number 1 disability, because we all tend to think of that very visible icon, the wheelchair, the international symbol of disability. The number 1 disability in Canada is actually related to pain, flexibility, and mobility. So that includes things like people who have arthritis, right? People who have back pain, people who walk with a limp, right? There's lots of things that covers. Second largest group at 20% is mental health. People who have a mental health condition. That's a diagnosable condition. That's not, I'm feeling sad today. That's actually a medically diagnosed condition. 29% of disabilities are visible, meaning if you looked at that person, you could probably guess that they have a disability. We never want to assume, but you could probably look and have a pretty good idea. 71% are non-visible. That has huge implications for business owners, because it means that 71% of, you know, the people that have a disability, 1 in 5 customers, actually aren't telling you, and the way you deliver your products or services may be more difficult than, you know, than it need be for them. Now, there's a broad range of disability, and I like to start out with this because I want to give you the idea and get us trapped out of the things we usually think of, which is, you know, blind people, maybe somebody with Down syndrome, maybe somebody who uses a wheelchair, because disability is much broader. Okay, under mobility, for instance, it could be someone who's lost a finger or a limb, or has like Erb's palsy, where you have not fully working use of one arm. Okay, it could be somebody with cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis. It could be somebody who has a limp. It could be somebody who's blind, who's deaf, who has a chemical sensitivity. All those are disabilities. Now you might say, Lisa, chemical sensitivity, come on. I actually once worked with a lab technician who could no longer work in a lab because she developed a sensitivity to formaldehyde. So she had a ton of skills and experience, but could no longer work in the job for which she had trained. That is a disability. Second group is usually developmental, cognitive, or intellectual. So think of people perhaps who have Down syndrome, who have fetal alcohol syndrome disorder, who have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or maybe have a cognitive brain injury, mild cognitive impairment. Third, learning. So learning disabilities include the one we always usually think of as dyslexia, but people can have different ways of learning or interacting with numbers, language, reading and writing. There's a number of different dyscalculia, dyspraxia, dysphagia, dyslexia. Okay, so again, somebody might have that, not be telling you, and you're wondering why they spell incorrectly all the time. It might be a disability, and a simple use of a spell checker might make that, you know, a lot better. And finally, and I think in COVID in particular, mental health conditions or mental health disabilities. And that can include things like anxiety and depression. I'm going to pause for a second and ask if anybody has any questions. It's a lot that we've covered in there, and I've only listed a few from each category. The next thing is disability can be permanent, episodic, or temporary. So for you as the employer, that can be different when you're putting in place accommodations that are temporary versus a permanent accommodation. Or an accommodation for somebody who has an episodic disability and only needs it at times, but then at other times doesn't. Disability can also be mild, moderate, or severe. So if we have somebody who has a mild mobility impairment, that might be that they walk with a limp. But if we have someone with a moderate, they might walk with a walker or a cane. Somebody with a severe mobility impairment might use a wheelchair. So the accommodations we put in place for each of these different disabilities can be quite different. All this is to say is there's a lot of disabilities. They all look different. They're all affected by what the job is, what the company is, what the disability is, who the person is. But really, when it comes right down to it, there's only one thing you as an employer need to know. Anybody have a guess? You don't need to know the name. You don't need to know the diagnosis. You don't need to know a treatment protocol. You don't need to know any of that. All you need to know is what has to be done differently in the workplace to allow that person to do the job. And we call those accommodations. Okay, here's some facts about why we want to even spend some time hiring somebody with a disability who requires an accommodation. First of all, business talking to business. 77% of small businesses who've hired people with disabilities actually said they met or exceeded expectations. That's a really big number. There's some reasons for that, but you know, I ran my own small business for 25 years. 77% of my employees did not meet or exceed my expectation. I had a bit of a higher turnover rate than that. So if that's the case, imagine that in this Bank of Montreal survey, that 77% said, yeah, I want to keep 77% of these people on my payroll. That's a really good stat. People with disabilities do have higher than average retention rates and company loyalty. That's really good for business because it means we're not going to have to constantly, you know, recruit, train, and onboard, and then, you know, hopefully let the person stay. Usually somebody says to me at this point, yeah, but it's going to cost me money for those accommodations you spoke about a moment ago, Lisa. But that's not actually true. It might, but it might not. So first of all, for people that do request accommodations, and not all people require an accommodation. I've had a disability for over 30 years, and I have only until this year required an accommodation. So remember those invisible disabilities we talked about? You might already have people working for you that have a disability but don't require an accommodation. Of the ones that do, 60% of accommodations provided to them cost nothing. They're more to do with flexibility. So maybe allowing someone to start half an hour later. Maybe allowing someone a once a month medical appointment. Maybe allowing somebody a frequent stretch break. That's one of my accommodations now. Okay. The next 33% of accommodations are a one-time cost of less than $500. And when we think of the cost of hiring somebody and retaining them, this is a really minimal number. So Mark Wafer, who owned 6 or 7, I think perhaps 7, Tim Hortons franchises across Canada. Mark hired people with disabilities. About 20% of his workforce at any given time over 20 years had a disability. Mark's turnover rate was 34%, and the average in the markets he worked in was 75 to 100%. So that additional, 30 to 60% was all profit Mark kept in his pocket. And his turnover rate wasn't just due to people with disabilities. His actual other employees without disabilities tended to stay longer. Mark estimated that to teach someone, to hire someone, find them, hire them, train them, have other people training them, cost Mark about $4,000 to train someone to pour coffee. If his turnover rate is that much less, it's a minimal cost against the $500, average accommodation cost, but it's also really small compared to what it costs to train and find new people. So it was a deal. Finally, we do know that capacity can be an issue. So how do I train people, on disability? How can I find talent? How do I know how to create an accommodation plan? Well, that's what we're here for. And we've created tools and toolkits. We've created a job matching platform to provide you with those free of charge. Additional benefits of hiring people with a disability. Well, I talked about the retention, and that leads to, cost savings, because it's up to 72% higher staff retention. And working alongside other people with disabilities lowers overall staff turnover by as much as 30%. So think of Mark's, dollar figure, $4,000 for an entry-level job. Think of how much you're saving if your turnover is 72% lower. People with disabilities rate average or better on job performance. 90% of them rate average or better on job performance. 86% of employees with disabilities rate average or better on attendance. And 98% of employees with disabilities rate average or better on safety. These are done from longitudinal studies, so we've been studying this over a long period of time with the same groups, and these figures have held up over time. So what I'm really here to offer you is a talent pool that has the skills and abilities needed to do the job, that are going to stay longer, work as hard, show up to work more often, and work more safely. It's a great pool to draw from. We also know that 1 in 5 Canadians has a disability. That means consumers. Some of your consumers have. And they are often more loyal, spending more per trip and shopping more often, and less likely to be swayed by coupons or deals. They also tend to shop in disability-friendly companies. The only way you're ever going to be a disability-friendly or disability-confident company is if you hire people with disabilities. Because it's kind of like what I was saying earlier. I can train you, but until you actually practice it or put it into use, you really can't see the benefits of it. Disability inclusive companies average 28% higher revenue, 2 times the net income, and 30% better profit performance on economic profit margins. And I have tons of these stats. They're all annotated here if you want to go look them up. But there's a lot of studies and documentation that shows that this is a great talent pool for you to recruit from. So if that's the case, why isn't everybody with a disability hired? Well, there are barriers. In fact, people with disabilities are employed at about half the rate of people without disabilities, which is one of the reasons we thought they'd make a great candidate pool. They're underemployed or unemployed. Why? Number 1, stigma. That's it, stigma, unconscious bias, right? That is the biggest barrier faced by people with disabilities. Misconceptions about what they can or can't do, misperceptions about the cost of employing somebody, misperceptions about their ability, that they're going to miss more work. All those facts that I just quoted to you, there's a correlation in that there's a myth. So one of the things usually, oh, well, they're going to miss more work to go to the doctors. Actually, they miss less. They've got a pretty good handle on their disability, so they know how often they probably need to check in. They tend to work more safely, so they're going to miss fewer days. Finally, there can be that whole issue of the HR capacity. So we're here to connect you. If we can't help you with a toolkit or tools or training, we'll connect you to an employment service provider in your area who can provide you, like help you with onboarding, help you with training, help you with a steady candidate pool as well as our tool. So we're doing this in conjunction with local service providers, colleges, and universities as well. Any questions? Okay, let's talk about addressing mismatches. Oh, yeah, let's start with this one. Disability is a mismatch. So I want us to stop thinking now as an employer. It doesn't help us to think about that medical model of disability I showed you earlier, because you don't need to know a diagnosis. You're not going to treat someone. You're not going to cure someone. So looking at it from a medical point of view doesn't make sense. There's another model, and it's called the social model of disability. And this is where I've pulled this definition from. It's from the World Health Organization. Think of disability as simply a mismatch between the person and the place they're working. And if we do that, we as employers can fix mismatches. That's actually pretty easy. And often when we fix those mismatches, we make life easier for everybody. So what might be some examples of mismatches? Any suggestions? Anybody want to put anything in the chat or unmute? Well, let's say we have somebody who takes a medication as soon as they get up in the morning, and it makes them a bit sleepy, so they have to start an hour later. Can we allow someone to start an hour later and work an hour more, or work through lunch? Yes. So we still have this really talented individual whose only difference is they start an hour later. For me, I need to stand up and sit down, stand up and sit down, or my back seizes up. That's another disability. I don't consider it my primary one, but as I get older, it's a gift. And that happens with a lot of our aging population, or it might be an ergonomic chair or an ergonomic keyboard, right? The mismatch is that my body's aging and that's an uncomfortable chair. So address the mismatch, get them a comfortable chair. We should do that for everybody. They probably will sit longer and do a better job, right? It's why we give people coffee breaks. We're not required to by law, but we do because it refreshes them. They get up, they go have a chat, you know, they're able to come back and concentrate more, right? So accommodations are actually a really good thing and they can help everybody. I'm going to use my own example. I started with the OCC about a year ago. I'd never needed an accommodation in the workforce. So, you know, I was asked, do you need an accommodation? And I said, no. My boss is a gentleman by the name of Louis De Palma. He's a really great guy, very garrulous. So about a week into it, I had to go up to him and I had to say, Louis, actually, I need an accommodation. And he was like, what do you need? And I said, I think I need my own office. And he said, what do you need your own office for, Lisa? No, because we're an open concept office with a limited number of private offices. And he says, where's the mismatch? And it's like, it's too noisy. And he goes, oh, I can fix that. And I got these lovely noise canceling headsets. That's my accommodation. Now, I, as a first time, you know, request for an accommodation shot for the office, Louis unfortunately wasn't going to give his up for me. So instead, I got these noise canceling headset. It turns out everybody in our office uses them, whether you have a disability or not, because it's an open concept office and it's noisy. Doesn't have to cost a lot. And in fact, most accommodations don't. Remember, I told you that 60% of the time they cost nothing. And the next 33%, this would be one of them, is a one-time cost of $500 or less. Of course, our minds always go to, I have to put in an elevator, which you don't. Okay, so really we address the mismatches by providing accommodations. Think of an accommodation as a productivity enhancement. You're actually making the employee better able to do their job. Why would you not want to do that? It's why the OCC lets everybody have these headsets, because we all work better when it's quieter. It might also be changes to our processes so that the person can do the job. So, you know, an example of that might be we require on-site attendance for our annual monthly meeting. We could actually allow someone to Skype in or call in over the phone. We've changed the way we do it, but that's an accommodation. Essential duties still need to be performed. So I don't want you thinking I'm telling you hire somebody and they don't have to do their job. No, they still have to be able to do the job. They just might do it slightly differently or use different tools for it. Standards are not lowered. So on our system, you're matched based on the skills. So you as the employer said, here's what I absolutely need. And our system matches based on that. So the person's able to do it, they just might do it differently. So when I train now, I've had to learn how to give virtual training versus in person. It's an accommodation I asked for when I joined, didn't get, but now, you know, everybody's very enthusiastic because we've gone from doing about, 20 or 30 webinars a year. Last year I did 203. That's actually making us more productive. So we need to get ourselves out of the assumption that different is going to cost more or be less effective. So what are some types of accommodations that might be provided? Well, they might be changes to our assumptions. So if you advertise one job on my system every year, I will come and give your company free training on unconscious bias and assumptions. It's something we could all learn about, given that we're in an increasingly diverse workforce. It could be changes to the way we communicate. So somebody might need you to write things down, or they write things down and have a notebook where they keep notes to make sure that they don't forget things. All right, I take excessive notes. You can ask anybody, you can ask Boyan. We've been spending this week talking about a tracker that I keep because I require that. As I've gotten older, my memory's not as good. It's not a disability thing, it's just an aging thing. But that can be a good thing. It could be changes to tools. And assistive technology has become really compatible with most of our processes and our software that we use. So like Microsoft Documents, Microsoft PDFs, Microsoft PowerPoints all have inbuilt features that most of us don't know about that would make our materials all accessible. We don't need to go outside our companies and pay for that. We'll provide you with training on that. Processes and approaches might need to change. So how we interview, what we ask for. So sometimes when I get job postings, I say, oh, do you really need that? So if somebody is on a floor plant and you need a warehouse operator, does he really need to have great verbal communication skills? Or did someone just write that in there at one point? You're looking for it, but it's not really a qualification you need. So really starting to match based on what you actually need, not what, is a document that's grown over 10 years until you get 3 pages on a job listing. And a really good example of this, I was working with a financial company last week, and they sent me their job posting, and it was really long. There had to be 20, here's what you must have, 20, here's what we'd like you to have. And I showed them a job posting for an astronaut, a literal rocket scientist at NASA. To be a rocket scientist at NASA, you need to have a PhD in STEM, and you need to have 4 years working in STEM. That's it, nothing else. So if I can get a job as a rocket scientist with 2 qualifications, why do I need 20 or 40 to be a financial analyst? There's something wrong with the way we're recruiting people. We can help you take a look at that. And finally, there might need to be changes to your spaces and places. You might have to have a wider aisle. You might have to have one accessible entrance, or the building where you operate in, you could ask your manager, or allow someone to work remotely if you can't make it accessible. There are lots of options, and we're here to give you some guidance on that if you require it. We do have a roadmap available on our website, on your website, and it walks you through how to find talent, some suggestions on how to interview and hire better, some suggestions on how to onboard, and we've curated what we think are the best toolkits out there. So like, I'm a huge fan of Conference Board of Canada's accessible hiring practices. So that's up there. There's going to be a new one coming out of Carleton in a couple months with free video training. That's amazing. That'll go up there as soon as that document's ready. So we're looking at the best. Hire for Talent is another really good toolkit that's out there. So we put them all up there and we send you to them and tell you exactly which ones you should be looking at. We can help connect you to people who can provide accommodations or give you some guidance. And then finally, we'd like to share and promote your success so people know that you're an inclusive business. To get started on our system, you create a free employer account. You access the free resources, which you don't even have to have an employer account to access the resources. You can contact Sophia and she will help you set up your own account, and you can join us on an employer panel or networking event. So I happen to know the Milton Chamber of Commerce is advocating to be on one of my webinars. So hopefully Alan, with that great radio voice, will also advocate to be on.
Absolutely.
Okay. How do we access talent? Well, this is the website, and I've got Halton Peel in there. It should say Sarnia. I apologize. I'll correct that. You sign up as a business. You will find the resources once you enter the website on the top button bar. how it works. So this is now the job matching technology, okay? So you've looked at, you can just access the resources without creating an account. But if you want to use our job matching technology for you, you create a free account to connect. You write a little bit about yourself and you post jobs, and we can help you with that. You post the jobs, it's instantly matched to anybody in our system. Now, I'm going to be fully transparent. I don't have enough candidates. I need more candidates. So I'm also talking to employment service providers and people to try to get them on. So have some patience with me. We've doubled our numbers since just a year ago, and we hope to double them again. Your job posting is matched to candidates. The candidate looks in it and decides whether or not they want to apply to you. They give you permission to look at their profile or to look at their resume, and then you consider whether you want to pursue that. You don't have to. So you review the candidates that are willing to apply and decide, whether or not you want to go ahead. And then it's the straightforward, you connect with them for an interview in whatever way you choose to do. So it's pretty simple. So the takeaway, well, we're providing you with tools, training, platform, job matching to help support you recruit qualified candidates with a disability. I'm not saying hire anybody with a disability, I'm saying qualified candidates. And if you have questions, my name and number will be in there. And, also we can share out Boyan's information. So that's my pitch to you. Any questions?
Any questions or comments? If not, I've got a couple myself. If I can have the screen time. Lisa, great presentation. Thanks very much for that. For those that might not know myself and my position here at the Chamber, I've only been here since June the 8th of 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic. I came here from a luxury car dealership in London, Ontario called Lexus of London. And we hired, at one point we had 3 staff members with disabilities. 2 of them could not speak. They were incredible employees. In the luxury car business, I mean, a lot of your staff are driving customers' luxury cars, highly sensitive environment. The challenges we had hiring young people to do the job consistently and on time was a disaster. Typical young kids these days. And I can say that because I got kids and I got grandkids. And we're continually having to teach them. The reliability of people that have disabilities or people that are sourced through discoverability, they have more in the game. It's like they're trying to prove something and they actually do a good job at proving that they can do the job. Lisa, you mentioned in your presentation about stigma.
Yeah.
Something that jumped right off the page when I was at Lexus of London. You talk about stigma. The stigma we found was with the older employees, like 45 and older. They're the ones that have to get their head around this. The young ones embrace these people like they're cool buddies. Like it was unbelievable and incredible. And as a matter of fact, some of these new employees would end up driving the young kids to work because they knew they'd be late. They were trying to help them. It was fascinating, I'm telling you.
It can make a great candidate pool. From one of these presentations, Alan, down in Mississauga, we had an employer who's looking to actually place 100 candidates with disability in their manufacturing facility, because again, the attendance and retention is huge.
They work harder than anybody else. I'm telling you, anybody that runs a business, whether you have 2 employees or 200 employees, in this day and age, February the 4th, 2021, hiring is a nightmare to begin with. It's a gong show. especially in this day and age of Zoom. I mean, you're Zooming people for interviews. You don't know what you got until they eventually show up at your door. And half the time, they don't even show up on time. They've got an excuse why they're late. So the talent pool that you're referencing, Lisa, is truly incredible. I speak from experience. I would encourage anybody. And again, the labor laws in this province, everybody's on probation for 90 days. If you don't like the situation, you've got a way out. But I assure you,
just like any other employee. Yeah, exactly.
absolutely,
It's just like
I
any other
assure
employee.
you will not be disappointed. It's fascinating, I'm telling you. I wouldn't hesitate for a moment. And when we look for employees, and eventually we're going to need some more employees, we're a nonprofit and we're scaled right back now, but we're anxious, as everyone is, to see more light at the end of this COVID tunnel so that we can get back on the road again. I mean, everybody, all of us are anxious to get out and spend some money. And to do that, you're wanting to go to businesses and obtain some service from fellow human beings. And that means talent. So if in your own company you're looking for talent, don't waste your time. Jump on board. Discoverability. It's worth your while, trust me.
He's definitely going on a webinar with me. And you can all have invitations.
Well, again, I can only be this passionate because I have actual experience. And honestly, if anybody here ever goes to London when things open up, if you want to go to the dealership and meet these people, you're more than welcome to. Call me, I'll tee it up. You'll be pleasantly surprised, I assure you.
Yeah, Southwest Ontario has a really good, actually, hub, and the London area has a really good hub of employment service providers working with employers. I think that Cohen Hiley is out of there too, right? And Joe,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, you brought something to mind there too, Lisa. And I'm trying to think the exact organization. There are a few organizations that are assisting with this ultimate goal of getting these people employment. But they would send representatives to the job place on a regular basis to see how things are going, which the networking was truly incredible.
Yeah, and we will connect you as well in your area. So sometimes you may have jobs that are like part-time jobs. So I'm referenced a law firm, Cohen Hiley out of London, and they hired a part-time receptionist who just happened to have Down syndrome. And she helped clear the tables in the meeting rooms and shred documents and, do the mail. And it wasn't a full-time job. And they eventually hired her effective, and she grew into that role. It started out with a smaller, but we can, there is opportunity in our system to be looking for part-time positions, and a lot of people with disabilities want to start there and then grow into a full-time job. But again, don't let that limit you, because we have college graduates. I was just on a webinar with an electrical engineer with a disability. I've placed paralegals, I've placed doctors with disabilities. So there's a wide range of candidates on the system. We're encouraging them, but the more jobs we get up there, the more I can go out and say, hey, in Sarnia Lambton, here are the employers, get on the system.
Absolutely. Yeah, we need a bigger pool of testimonials, and it will come because this will grow for sure. It's funny, you talk about people growing into a position. One employee we had with a disability, we had a concierge at the dealership that would welcome people to the front door, and it was a young person. They were spending more time in the washroom making sure they looked good, that the person with the disability was doing a better job accommodating, greeting people at the front door coming to the dealership. That we made some modifications because they outperformed the people that we assumed were going to do a good job. So there's no question they give 110%. And I'll tell you, back in the day, I never would have guessed that in my wildest dreams, never. But as I say to the group today, I speak from experience, and that's important. And that's my testimonial. You've got to give it a try. You have to. It makes sense, as they say. And save some time in the hiring process. There's a lot of benefits to it. Sorry to
Absolutely.
tramp all over your show, Lisa.
No, I don't think it is. I mean, I think this is what we want to have healthy discussions about this. And I also want you to feel, if you have doubts, you have concerns, raise them now, because I'm more than willing to help you. I've been working in this field for quite a few years. I've worked on, as a person with a disability looking for a job. I've also helped as an employment counselor, and I've also been working with businesses to help them onboard and support candidates with disabilities. So, we want to be transparent. I just, safe space to ask any questions you have. And if you're sold, I hope you sign up and reach out and create an account.
Another quick question for you, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
Before COVID times in London, when I was working there, we used to run job fairs.
Yeah.
That might be an opportunity for us. I mean, we're all staring at screens.
So we
do a
did start, Alan, our networking events were supposed to be in person.
Yeah.
And we launched the first one in March 12th, and I believe in the 10th was the shutdown. And so we had to go virtual. And it just doesn't lend itself to interviewing the way that, so we've created these networking events instead, where at least we can have discussions. You as a business owner might meet some people that you think are good candidates. You can reach out to them after, but it's really, and not everybody's their best self virtually. So it's really a low risk way of trying to maintain relationships with a community of job seekers you've maybe never worked with. Maybe some of the people, I think, Alan, your point about your whole company has to be comfortable with this.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Starts from the top, but your whole company has to be comfortable. So send out some of those people that aren't as representatives and say, do a good job. This is like 1 hour of your time, but you can learn and talk to a few people, and it's a safe way of interacting, and as best we can do in these virtual times. But we will be going back to job fair / networking live once COVID ends.
Yeah, no, we're all anxious for sure. No question about it. And again, that would help fast tracking, the chore of seeking out new employees. Because
Exactly.
again,
yeah, and we're hoping our system does that too, Alan, so that, again, I'd like to see, because if you have, say, 4 or 5 agencies in Sarnia-Lambton, everybody's candidates are on there so that you're getting the right candidate for the right job. We just don't want you hiring people that aren't the right fit. They have to be able to do the job. So we think that, this has worked really well. It happened in Hamilton. We had a small business owner in hospitality sector who wanted 13 hires, and we ended up with 4 hires, and the rest he went outside. But yeah, he's a hotel owner, and really worked out well for him. He wanted everything from, I think he got an office manager right down to working, not down to, but working in the laundry room.
Wow, glad to hear. And I apologize to the entire group. I've been doing too much talking here. Does anyone have any other questions or experiences that they can share with the group today? Something in the chat?
I can comment on the Cohen-Hiley story you were talking about. I actually am
thanks, Laura.
I'm very familiar with that story. Joe Hoffer is actually somebody that I've worked with a few times. So Joe is one of the lawyers at Cohen-Hiley. And he's a huge advocate for people with a disability and getting them into the workplace. So yeah, very familiar with that. And Joe is actually going to be doing an online kind of keynote speaking event for us coming up in March. So it's all about, bringing new employers on board to hire people with a disability. So Cohen-Hiley is a great place to work. And I thought it was good that you brought that up, because it just reiterates that having Joe on our side is a great guy to have on our side for sure.
And I think it shows the breadth of industries that people with disabilities can work in. Again, because disability is so variable, you might have somebody with anxiety, but they're the best scientist in the field. You might have somebody, I had a paralegal that we placed 2 paralegals in a downtown Toronto law firm, and they said they were the best hires they'd had ever, period. And they asked, can we only recruit directly from now on, because they were just amazing paralegals. Now, there were some accommodations that were required. So in the one case, the individual needed extra time to take notes because of a brain injury. But pretty simple when you get a candidate who's, just needs 15 minutes after a meeting to make notes. We've got medical professionals that, it's such a wide range. So if you can't imagine somebody driving a forklift, there's people with disabilities that can drive a forklift, drive cars, be lawyers, be paralegals, be financial analysts. The banks are really working with a lot of people with autism in tasks that a lot of us might consider repetitive, but that actual people with autism sometimes flourish at doing. I have another business that hired a graphic designer with autism. He doesn't speak well, but he designs incredibly. So, don't let it limit you and think, well, I don't have a job opportunity for somebody with a disability because my field is this or this, I have these jobs. Pretty much, any job somebody with a disability can fill because disability is so variable.
Any other questions or comments from the group today?
I'm going to sign off then. And thank you so much. And Ellen, I will be reaching out to get you on my program. Oh,
you're too kind. Thank you, Lisa. Now, the slide deck that you showed today, that's available to us?
Yes, I'm going to email it to Fatima, and as well as a link to a short survey. The survey is only 3 minutes, 5 questions. Please, it would help me because it lets me know what I need to improve and what's working and what's not working. The deck, as well as my contact information. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Awesome. To the audience, if there are no further comments or questions, Lisa, on behalf of us all here in Sarnia and Lambton County, thank you very much for taking time to visit us today and share the program. It's pretty exciting, and I know that we will take advantage of it. And please stay in touch. You've got friends in Sarnia, Lambton for sure.
Great. And if you're with an employment service agency, please reach out and I'll talk to you separately about how we can coordinate. Thank you very much. Bye.